Presidential debates have been a staple of campaigns for decades, and history has shown that they can have the power to sway undecided voters and solidify public perception of the candidates.
I am not going to exploit, for political purposes, my opponent's youth and inexperience.
Yes, how has the national debt...
Mr. President, have you looked at your pension?
You know, I don't look at my pension. It's not as big as yours, so
well,
because you'd be in jail.
Those exact moments changed the trajectory of the United States and the world forever. During debates, candidates stand beside their opponents and present their policies, personality, and vision to millions of viewers. 73 million people viewed the first Biden-Trump presidential debate in the lead-up to the 2020 election. 80.6 million viewers set by the only debate between Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan in 1980. And of course, the record-breaking Trump versus Hillary debate, with 84 million viewers across 13 channels. But when sometimes things seem spontaneous, witty, or from the heart, they usually aren't. Presidential debates are not just a discussion between two candidates, they're much more than that. They're a psychological tool to influence public opinion. Many presidents won entire elections with a simple catchphrase.
Did you use that $916 million loss to avoid paying personal federal income taxes?
Of course I do. And so do all of her donors, or most of her donors.
How do these debate tactics actually work, and what goes on behind the scenes? This is how presidents win elections with the power of words. The impact of a debate is questionable by many. History shows otherwise. Many credit Kennedy's narrow victory in 1960 with an appealing performance in the televised debate. Then President Gerald Ford may have cost himself re-election when he fumbled a question about Soviet military strength in Eastern Europe in 1976. Ronald Reagan, formerly a professional actor, used strong debate performances against Jimmy Carter and Walter Mondale to help secure 2 election victories. On the other hand, an ill-advised decision to look at his watch in the 1992 debate became a memorable footnote in President Bush's defeat against Bill Clinton. The first presidential debate of the television era was the 1960 debate between Senator John F. Kennedy and Vice President Richard Nixon. It is famous primarily for the fact that the intimate experience of television opened up a whole new element to debates, how people looked and how they came across to the viewers. Kennedy was young, handsome, rested, and made up for television. Nixon, while also young, didn't look it, appearing tired, sick, shifty-eyed, and without makeup. The difference was dramatic. Those who heard Nixon on radio thought he had won, but those who watched on television thought Kennedy had won. The first televised debate proved that the political class was indeed in uncharted waters. Following the 1960 debates, it took another 16 years before candidates agreed to debate each other on television. The next presidential debates took place in 1976 between then-Governor Jimmy Carter and the incumbent President Gerald Ford. In many cases, candidates shifted elections using simple yet powerful statements, but sometimes they stupidly shoot themselves in the foot. Gerald Ford fell behind during the 1976 campaign and decided he needed to debate Jimmy Carter. Ford was relatively unknown to the public despite being the incumbent president, and not many people were familiar with Carter either. During the pair's second debate, Ford declared,
"There is no Soviet domination of Eastern Europe, and there never will be under a Ford administration."
The moderator, Max Frankel of the New York Times, was unable to hold back his response.
Did I understand you to say, sir, that the Russians are not using Eastern Europe as their own sphere of influence and occupying most of the countries there and making sure with their troops that it's a communist zone?
That moment is said to be the moment Ford lost the elections. Candidates must be extremely careful. On one hand, they have to answer the questions they've been asked without mistake. On the other hand, they have to interact with their adversary. which usually means highlighting their mistakes, lies, and asking them uncomfortable questions. In the modern era, we've seen something like that happen repeatedly. Sometimes what's supposed to be a hard question for your opponent turns into an assist.
More Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look,
Politicians are not quick-witted comedians. They leave nothing to luck. Everything is calculated. But have you ever asked yourself, how do candidates train for debates? What are their secret techniques? In Hollywood, they call it method acting. In politics, it's an obsessive month-long preparation. It's best to start as soon as possible, but it is only after the conventions that candidates really have a frame of their opponent. Debate preparations are divided into two key parts, the setup and the team. The team are the people invited to help the candidate prepare for the debate. It usually involves a strategist, a writer, assistants, technicians, researchers, and a guest whose job is to play the opponent in the rehearsals. Just like combat sports, they call him a sparring partner, who recreates the persona of the opponent right down to the smallest of details. Ohio Senator Rob Portman played Obama in Romney's debate prep, while Massachusetts Senator John Kerry played the role of Romney. Usually, debate teams are small and tight, giving the candidate a better chance to focus and avoid leaks. The setup is the whole environment where candidates prepare. Think of it as the training camp for fighters. Some candidates settle for standard office rehearsals while others recreate the exact same environment in an actual television studio. Al Gore, for example, wanted the presidential debate room replicated right down to the position of the podiums and even the ambient temperature in the room. The months of preparation for George Bush's debates included 10 or 12 full mock debate sessions, mostly at his ranch in Texas. Obama was ensconced for the last 3 days in a debate camp in Nevada. The preparation goes as follows. The debate prep team is to put together a briefing book on policy, as well as a position book detailing the opponent's stance on all the key issues. The team will try to anticipate the questions right down to the possible phrasing. To look for clues, the researchers pore over archive interviews by the moderator. Don't expect to hear anything new though. The candidate is generally advised to stick to familiar territory, using tried and tested material, which has been run past focus groups. More than 95% of material on debate nights is recycled. However, that doesn't mean it needs to be super formal or boring. Sharp one-liner attacks known as zingers are a key part of the strategy. Zingers are among the most effective materials used. They're basically the reverse card. The candidate flips the situation around in his advantage by ridiculing his opponent.
You're the sucker. You're the loser.
This is a tough business to run for president.
I know you're a tough guy, Jeb.
I think Governor Romney maybe hasn't spent enough time looking at how our military works. Well, Governor, we also have fewer horses and bayonets.
Zingers are not the only technique used. There's also riffs, where a candidate builds up a kind of rhetorical rhythm using repetition. They are not designed to be memorable, but a useful hook on which to hang an answer.
By recognizing our common humanity, by treating every child as important, regardless of the color of their skin or the station into which they were born, and to do what's necessary to make opportunity real for every American. By doing that, we express God's grace.
Another technique used is what they call front-end responsiveness, which simply means answering the question as fast as possible. This is important for two main reasons. Number one, come off as knowledgeable and confident in your response. Number two is leaving the remaining time attacking the other guy's plan. And there's one president who's a master at this.
that's all of his donors and special interests out there. The war in Iraq was a big, fat mistake. Took him 5 days before his people told him what to say. This guy will say anything.
Apart from what needs to be said, candidates also train on how they need to say it. This is the part where they rehearse with body language experts in an attempt to master the delivery. Bush Sr. made the mistake of glimpsing at his watch during his 1992 debate against Bill Clinton and Ross Perot, giving the impression that he couldn't wait for it to be over, a mistake that many experts argue was the reason for his loss. Al Gore's sighs while George W. Bush gave his answers in 2000 were similarly damaging, which broke another rule, which is to never show disdain for the opposition. The day of the debate, the candidate goes through the main points of his plan, along with his prepared responses for the most predictable questions. However, there is no last-minute preparation. Behind the scenes, the TV production team goes to great lengths to make sure the rivals don't bump into each other. Candidates take their podiums, and the show begins. After the debate, the candidates team analyzes the public and media reaction to adjust accordingly. Everything said and done by candidates is calculated, from their rallies, TV interviews, tweets, podcasts, to the debate itself. Even if it looks spontaneous, it's still calculated. They first worry about the votes. Policy comes later. Subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.